Hello, hello. My name is Mayor Cotter, or better known as Clay. I am the captain of Carolina Luxrays, and this is HDL Season 5 Draft Recap. So, for a brief history lesson, this league, HDL, was formed by Flip Kiki and Hylian Media. Their links will be in the description, so go check them out. While I joined in the project in Season 2 and have been part of the main three ever since. HDL is on the surface another Pokemon Draft League. However, we have had a lot of new flair and other things that have not been implemented in other leagues to give us our own personal sting to what we're doing. And so with that being said, let's go over some of the clauses, bans, all the systems in place before we go over my team and how I feel about it. So one of the things that sets HDL apart, specifically Season 5, because we're experimenting with this new concept. We call it the hybrid-based draft. So if you knew about anything competitive Pokemon related in terms of draft leagues, you know that there are two formats that are basically undisputed as the two main ones. You have tiers, which use a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, and tier 5. And you get a free one of each of those before you have to use points to pick the remaining Mons on your list. Points-based drafts is very, very similar to what we have here, where you go 19 all the way down to 1, and you give a total budget to pick your entire team, disregarding tier, having to have tier requirements. We decided we were going to do a mixed style this time around, so we went with this way to allow for creative freedom still, but at the same time, not be too overbearing in terms of what people can pick in terms of top-heavy drafts. This is more similar to a points-based draft, but we did make some modifications incorporating elements from the tiers-based one. For example, we made a staples category. So staples is included of Mons that are the top tier, but instead of going from a tier 1 and allowing people to pick multiple of them, you could only have one staples Mon, and that's it. And so it allows a lot more creative freedom with your lower pick Mons, because you're not having to pick two of these to keep up with the other teams. Everyone's on a playing field of you can only have one staples. You also have how the mega tiers are represented, because in points-based drafts, megas are usually included in the actual point categories themselves and not in their own separate column. But we wanted to emphasize picking megas, especially with some additions here. And we copied the style of megas from the tier-based ones, where you get points depending on if you pick a lower tier one, but they've been scaled down to fit more attributed to this style. And you get 85 points total to pick 10 to 11 mods here from this list. And you have to have one staple and one mega. And lastly, let's go over how we handle Terras, the new mechanic introduced in Scarlet and Violet. So this took a little while to figure out a coherent system, because you can't do them the exact same way you could, for example, Z crystals, which Z crystals were the most similar. So how we decided to go about this is from another league that me and two other close associates are also a part of, is having so we have 15 points disassociated from the 85 points. Those 15 points can make up to 1 to 2 Terra Captains. So in the hypotheticals that we described to people before we started the draft, is you can pick a 15-point Mon. You could pick Porygon Z and make that your Terra Captain for those equivalent of 15 Terra points. That would be your one and only Terra, and if you wanted to replace it, you need to use a transaction. So you're not entirely locked into it, but you still need to be conscious, because you do not have the means to do it repeatedly. Although, one thing you can do is hypothetically pick an 11 Flamingo and I would still give you 4 points left. So you could pick a 4-point Mon to be your second tier captain. And so that way they give a lot more freedom in terms of you can give lower tier Mons a chance to shine, but you could also give it to a higher tier Mon and it would be about the same equal footing. So that's how we handle Terras. Obviously, we have the banned category here to show what isn't in banned, and we have notes on Pokemon that have a pseudo ban on them. For example, Lopunny Mega can't run a return or frustration. Kyron Black, you can't run Dragon Dance. Alexam, you can't run Nasty Paw, Blastoise, no Shell Smash, etc. Alright, let's go over the other coaches in this league and their team names before delving deeper into mine and looking at what Mons I was able to obtain and if I'm happy with it. And then, finally, who I'm going to be fighting week 1. So, to start off the list, we have Death Egg Robots, manned by Snazzy Z. We have Mace, who is rocking Go Bees. Unfortunately, there's no logo. We have the Legion of Bend, Hylian Media, and that one guy Ben, respectively. Canberry Cacturns, Lion Boy 20. Connecticut Tyrantos, manned by Finn, Commander Finn. Malform Mayhem, manned by Sandy Simus. Time Space Anomalies, manned by Purgatory and Mighty Barb, respectively. Hoboken Haluchas, Flipkicky. Brooklyn Bayonets, Callisto. Salt Construction Incorporated, Yurun. And then finally, Moporko Otachi Sword, manned by Spooks, Test Spooks, and Kevin, respectively. And then finally, Carolina Luxrays for me, Maricata. Now let's go over the Mons I picked. So to start off the list, my staples Mon I picked was Masquerade. Now, Masquerade is obviously the grass type starter from Gen 9, and it is Greninja 2.0, basically, with grass dark instead of water dark, but also rocking Protean. It gets so much. It gets so much for a Gen 9 Mon. Like, one of the issues you have when you pick a new Mon in a Gen is they oftentimes don't have nearly as much utility and coverage just because they haven't been around as long as the previous Mons. But Masquerade has basically everything you ever needed with Greninja. Plus, Flower Trick is just insane. It can 70 base power, always results in critical hit, and there's no accuracy check, so you don't have to worry about missing. So it's like, yeah, this Mon could do a little bit of everything. It's obviously way more of a physical attacker and a physical abuser, but it has a whole bunch of other fun stuff. Next up, Heatran. Now, Heatran's been a staple ever since inception, and with Gen 9 is no exception. And with the little new tricks it gets from Gen 8 and Gen 9 respectively, I think this is easily one of the best fire types to pair with Masquerade, because it's offensive, but it offers a lot more bulk than Masquerade does. And then to round up the Grass, Fire, Water core, we got Primarina. Now, Primarina has been going up in usage as time has gone on, mostly because it has been given access to moves that greatly diversify its moveset. For example, Flip Turn, being able to momentum switch out of Primarina is absolutely insane, even if it's physical. Stored power, like this thing is just a beast. It's a whole different world. No pun intended for nickname. Anyway, next up is Noivern. Noivern is obviously amazing. Dragon flying, one of the best ones to get, especially with how cheap it was. We had it at 9 points. And yeah, it's good old Noivern. I don't think they gave it anything new besides like Terra Blast and whatnot. Unfortunately, this mon was 11 points, and I didn't have a good mon to put it next to it. I mean, sorry, 9 points. It just felt a missed opportunity for me. So I might change up my Terra Captains at some point. But regardless, next mon, the first Terra Captain, Sandy Shocks. Now, I hate how the Gen 9 alt forms for certain Pokemon have just been, what if they got legs? So Magneton, Toadscroll, like all of them are just basically them having legs now instead of doing what they was obviously probably cooler and just floated. But Electric Ground, base 101 speed, it literally inherently speed creeps any base 100 Mons, gets every kind of hazard, it gets physical and special. Yeah, it's like Magneton, but like if you turned it into Magnezone stats and giving it ground typing, it's just so good. So next up, my Mega Venu. Now this one is a little weird considering I already have Masquerade as my grass type, but these two kind of they offer different things to each other. I personally feel so. Even if the grass switch into ground is not as effective, because ground is neutral to Venusaur, it's resistant on Masquerade, but Masquerade is not inherently bulky, so it's not going to be a good switch in for that anyway. But I think with the rest of my team, I have coverages for ground and other weaknesses double grass exposes me to. But Mega Venusaur, again, is very different from what Masquerade does. And it's also just a mix-up of which one can do better. Because sometimes I could run this thing with offensive moves, but it does better than Masquerade because it could take hits that I needed to. Whereas Masquerade could probably just one-shot things depending on the matchup. So it just depends. Next up, we got Mismagius. Now, Mismagius was one of the 4 Terra Captains I was debating hard about, like literally for like an hour or so, and I decided against it because while yes, its move pool definitely supports having the ability to Terra, and also getting Terra Blast, I just couldn't do it in comparison to some of the other ones that needed it. Like Sandy Shock's coverage is good, but if it had the ability to like Terra Fairy, for example, that covers a lot of things that it can't normally do on its own. Whereas Mismagius could kind of cover things inherently, just because of how crazy this moveset is, without needing the Terra. And again, this is one of those things where I'll go ahead and say it. My Terra selection, I did it the way I did it at the time, but as time has gone on, I've seen the other Pokemon I could have done and what they offered, and I'm still not 100% convinced about my Terra Captains, but it might change after I play a game or two with it. We'll see. But yeah, Mismagius, even disregarding Terra, just offers a good special attacker that can do some utility stuff as well as some other things. So next up, we got Fortress, the utility Mon. Now, this guy is, I think in terms of hazard setters, I have 4 to 5. And that's like, some of them get both Spikes and Stealth Rex. Like, I actually didn't even realize until after the fact that Sandy Shucks gets Stealth Rex and Spikes. But this is also a good remover. It's a good ground switch in. It inherently, actually, funny enough, it actually gets crazy physical moves now. Like get body press. It's just it's just like fucking, that's a 379 body press inherently. And so yeah, it's good old Fortress. Utility at its core, but it can do some other things if it needs to. Also, they gave it Ice Spinner. They gave it Ice Spinner too, so you could literally get rid of hazards and terrains. What more can I say? Next up, another alt form, new to this gen. Tauros Paldean Water. So it's really funny. I was one of the few people that had more than 10 points available by the time like the last few rounds were going. I had like 16, and I literally, this was one of the last picks of the draft, and I picked it for 11 points because no one else had the points to pick it. And it's just, again, this is also a weird thing if you consider Primarina, but if Venusaur and Masquerade were different, then Taurus and Paldean Water are like fire and water, but they're both water. Because this Mon is an insane physical attacker. I mean, absolutely insane. Kunshu as an ability is also great. And Raging Bull as a move, being physical, water type, brick is absurd. Gets everything you need for a physical water type to be, plus a fighting type inherently at its core. Yeah, it's just this was a steal, and it actually, funny enough, water fighting and water fairy have common weaknesses, sure, but what they cover are two completely different facets, and so it might come an issue later at a later point, but as it stands right now, I think it works. I think it works beautifully. But now to the final Terra Captain, second to last Mon. I have 11 Mons in total. One of the few that have 11 in comparison to 10. Perugly. Now, Perugly is kind of what I was describing with Magius, where there's this thing is a Gen 4 Mon, so its coverage is very diverse. But the reason I gave it to Perugly is, one, it doesn't have the ability to do Terra Blast, and I mean that might be a thing of like, oh, I should have given it to Miss Magius then. But again, it was the thing of like, I think Miss Magius doesn't need it, even disregarding Terra Blast as a move for in this hypothetical situation. Perugly being able to Terra Dark into knockoff or something, inherently giving it an attack boost, just without any of the added nonsense of like, was too good to pass up. Especially when this thing gets so much cover, like different unifying dark like coverage besides just dark. Like obviously it gets Iron Tail, gets like a double normal that would increase its power by a lot. Gets Thunderbolt, and it's special, and it's also it's like a thing of like a special attack is obviously lower. But this one's base like stats besides speed are pretty evened out, so you could totally get away with running a Terra Thunderbolt. And with the Terra Stab increase, it would actually put it up to about where physical attack is. And considering this thing doesn't get like Thunder Punch, or obviously, but it just made more sense to give it to this. Or the other Mon I picked, which is Lunatone. Now, Lunatone I actually put in the exact same boat as Miss Magius in terms of toss-up. Like, if I was going to give it to either of them, I was not sure. And utility in the terms of like screens and whatnot. But this one felt like to me if Lunatone did anything best, it would be the utility that it offered from screens and coverage moves, or just the ability to be a Calm Mind Store Power sweeper. And to me, it's just like it's Moonblast. It doesn't need that. It doesn't. It also, this is another Mon that's not inherently available to get Terra Blast, so it was also missing out on Terra Blast. But yeah, no, that's basic. That is all my team. Overall, I'm extremely happy. I didn't get sniped once, but it's kind of hard not to when you barely have a plan going into it besides a few Mons. I sniped a good many people, specifically with Noivern. Noivern, I sniped like 3 people with it, because I also picked it early. Because at 9 points, Noivern was the steal. But yeah, I think that's enough rambling. I am pretty happy with it. I could see flaws with it, but those flaws could be very toned down depending on how it's able to play. Like, if it's able to play in the way that I picked these Mons, then there's no contest. But there's obviously going to be factors I do not know about, as well as things that I overlooked. So each team has 4 transactions used throughout the season, and if you change your Terra Captain, that counts as a transaction. So I have to be really careful about that. But as it stands, I am really happy with what I have. And to end this off, my week 1 opponent for this week is Morpeko Otachi Sword, Spooks, and Kevin. I expect the video. I'm going to hopefully upload these every Sunday. Hopefully. Air quotes. But to go over what they have one of the most annoying teams I think I've ever seen in a draft league. Goldigo, Sableye, Wo-Chan, Screamtail, Decidueye, Hisuian, Kutra Hisuian, Ditto, Tentacruel, Orbital, Executor, and Pidgeot. With this Screamtail and Pidgeot being their Terramons. And with that, I'm going to get out of here and start prepping, and I'll hopefully see you guys next Sunday. Bye-bye.